I mean, everyone was excited around me oh, you're photographing Queen today, or Duran Duran, or Spandau Ballet, or whatever, in the 80s, of course. And doesn't matter how much I liked their music or how much I disliked their music, I tried equally as hard to try and produce my best for that artist or those artists. But I grew up in an area where when you reach the age of going to work, that is, if you didn't go to a grammar school or something or a university, you went in the factory. And we all knew that we were going to end up in the factory. That was our future, really. But I passed my 11 plus. I was one of the few people that passed it. So I went to a type of grammar school. So therefore I had a good start in life, in a sense, as far as education. Because the alternative was go to the school of fighting, where they beat up the teachers as well as beat up each other. Also in grammar school, I had to leave it because my mum and dad didn't have any money at all. They were factory workers and they needed me to earn a few pennies on top. I ended up in the factory like everybody else did. It was almost a miracle that I got into the arts. The man who was in charge of the factory floor, and he said, "Have you ever been interested in photography?" I said, "No, not really. I think you'd quite like it. I think you'd be quite good at it." I said, "Oh, right." He said, "I'll take you along to the camera club and see if you like it." I sort of liked it, showed a little bit of interest in it. I was in love at the same time with a woman, a great character who worked in the office as well. But all of a sudden she left me. I was devastated. I decided I've got to get out of that situation and went to Manchester College of Art, to study photography for the next 3 years. I was very ambitious. I wanted to get on in photography. I didn't want to meander in the background as some photographer. I wanted to reach the very top of my profession. I really did have that ambition. And I knew in order to get to the very top of my profession was not to adhere to, say, the client's boring ideas or the advertising agency's boring ideas or whatever, but was to push my own thoughts through as strongly as I possibly could. Of course, I couldn't everything, but as much as often as I could, and to do my own thing, to be very strong and do my own thing and try anything that is at all possible to ensure I got a good photograph, whatever I had to do. Whether I had to be an actor and act dishonestly, like I would act the thing, "I don't know what the hell I'm doing," to the subject. "Can you please help me? This is my first job," because they don't know anything about photographers and that. And I haven't got a clue. "Can you just think of an idea for me, please?" Or whatever I'd say. I can't remember now. I'd try that one. Things like for them not to know what I'm photographing. I fooled a politician on the pipe, yeah. I've only ever used one lens, or maybe a standard lens I would use occasionally, but I only ever used two lenses all my career, really. A 150 and an 80mm on the medium format, of course. I used a long lens, like a 150, which is like a longish lens, not a long one, but it's a longish lens. Because I learned from the Surrealists, for instance, the juxtaposition of objects, putting two objects together that don't respond to each other or create a friction, or I compress the perspective on a lot of my work. I compress the perspective, in other words, to bring the two elements together. I can't remember the first time I used it or the last time I used it, anything but a zoom or a telephoto lens. I can't remember. It's got to be decades. I spent weeks inside the National Film Theatre looking at the history of cinema, especially the German cinema and the French cinema. It just fed my imagination, that did. And then the Surrealists seemed to feed my imagination as well, the Surrealist painters at that time. I became really fascinated with the Surrealists as well as the Expressionists. And I've always been very close to painting. I've not been very close to photography. I've always lived a slightly detached life. as a photographer, from photographers. I've always been closer to artists, I like to feel. I feel I've reached the point where I sort of jump into photography to get my idea across. It's not something that is like second nature to me. I'm more interested in the other art forms, much more than I am in my own art form. Growing up in the black country, it was all black and white, heavy shadows. And I started working but with the inspiration that they gave me, really, with light, where they used light, etc. Through the back of the cab, you know, the Metropolis shot. And that shot was the shot that I found when I left college. Did it within the first year of leaving college, that I could become a photographer. I was like over the moon when I'd taken that picture. I couldn't believe it. I was almost down on my knees on London Bridge, praying to God, thank you, dear Lord. Maybe I can make it in photography. Because I was just a young man. I was just ambitious, as I said. I was hardworking and ambitious, but I had no guarantee that I could really rise in the medium. There's no guarantees. And I always followed music. And before I got involved in music, shooting album covers, whatever, I read the music press every week and bought records all the time. I had a good collection of records. So music was part of my life, really. But then when I joined the music industry, only occasionally did I like the music of the people I photographed. Only on occasions. But I tried incredibly hard. Doesn't matter how much I liked their music or how much I disliked their music, I tried equally as hard. And to try and produce my best for that artist or those artists. And some of my most famous album covers that I personally did are from some of the artists I didn't really get on with very terribly well. I found working in the industrial world, i.e. photographically, on corporate work, portraiture for Management Today, people like that, magazines like that, photographing the businessmen, associated with them far more. I was one of them, you know, a young one of them, a naive one of them, or whatever. Or only a few years before I was photographing them, because I stepped from the world I was working in into the world that I was working in as a photographer. I found it wonderful that I could talk to them about anything regarding engineering, or I could talk to them and they could talk to me, and they were delight to me a little bit more, can we say, because I was quite knowledgeable and in that world. I got my studio in 1980 down the street here, and I learned how to use light in my own way. I developed techniques, you know, special effects, all sorts of things. And I got known for my light. I used to be called Brian Griffin, the 16 light man or something. Something crazy like that. I didn't use 16 lights all the time. Maybe I did occasionally, but it was a decade that I brought my way of working a little bit in the public eye a bit more. So I was doing bands. When you do bands, I mean, your photographs are in every town in the country, whatever. Your mum and dad sees your work, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins see your work, your friends do. It was the world prior to internet, you have to understand that, where our work only existed if we had an exhibition or we had a portfolio with it in. We had no social media. So I became a bit more well-known, so I got even more work and more opportunity to be good. And then eventually, I almost had the life of a rock star in a way. I wasn't a rock star by any stretch of the imagination, but I started to have the effects of that situation, like obviously drugs, alcohol. I worked myself into the ground, so I had like a nervous breakdown type. All those things came about. So the 80s I remember for that. And the 80s, like we were saying downstairs, that money was just raining from heaven. And money just cascaded out of the sky. There was so much around. The interesting part of it is that like picture editors, marketing managers would be really interested in photography and would be wanting to have good photography in his journal, whatever. Everyone seemed to be around photography more than they are today. Seemed to be interested in it more. It was at the forefront more of everyone's minds, I feel. It's more in the fashion world now that people are interested in photography. It tends to have disappeared from the corporate world, it's totally disappeared, where it was really an interesting world to be part of. In the magazine world, magazine photography, most of it's rather tedious and boring of the colour supplements or whatever. There's no real trying to do really interesting creative stuff. The people in those sort of positions don't employ the people who could possibly do it, and the people who possibly could do it get it eroded from them unless they absolutely love being a photographer. And I don't know how many people absolutely love being a photographer these days, because it's a hard job to have, really. And there are a few people who earn very good living in photography, of course, but the majority of people don't. Being a photographer, you don't know when the next pound's coming from if you're a freelance, for instance. I mean, I've always accepted jobs not for money. I've accepted them not because how much they're going to pay me, but how much I want to do them. I always use that as the forefront reason for doing a job, is what am I going to get photographically out of it? I don't go, if I can buy a new car or something, I don't even drive. I don't drive anymore, so totally shoot digital now, totally. I really think it's really good. I use a medium format camera, which I've always used. I don't like mirrorless cameras very much at the moment. You know, they're all mirrorless now. I don't like to look at like a TV screen type of thing, you know. I don't particularly like DSLRs because it's like, you know, it's a bit long for me. I like the format of medium format. It's like a painting almost. You know, the oblong is like a painting. It's the right shape. Whilst with DSLRs, it's more elongated. I mean, it's okay, but it doesn't feel like doing something really artistic. It doesn't feel artistic. I always come up with an idea to approach a photograph. A lot of imagination. As I said to you before, I use telephoto lenses where everyone thinks it's a standard lens or a wide-angle lens. Maybe that makes a difference. I think it does. It compresses everything, makes everything look slightly different. I always frame in the camera. It's sort of like Henri Cartier-Bresson always framed in his camera, apparently. I like to build intrigue in my pictures. The decisive moment which Cartier-Bresson had in his locker, or whatever you call it, he photographed like the decisive moment, like when the punch came or whatever. Whilst the Americans developed an anti to that, which is very good, which was the non-decisive moment, which therefore it's after the moment has happened generally or prior to the moment happening. You feel that something's going to happen, but you don't know exactly what. And then something has happened and you don't know exactly what has happened most of the time, unless there's something obvious. I employ that quite a lot, intrigue. Intrigue is one of my great things, I think, and my great qualities that I actually have. The reason I think it's a great thing to have in the content of an image is the fact that when a human being goes around an exhibition of photography or looks at photography, well, they spend very little time looking at the image generally. It's because the human mind can work out what the image is all about, really, in milliseconds. But if they can't work out exactly what's happening, then they'll stay and look at it longer. And that's why I initially did it. That's why I did it, is so people would spend a little bit longer time looking at my pictures. I never gave much time for people who didn't like my work. I didn't care. I tell people who work for me or with me not to ever care about what people think. Just do it, you know, just don't think about whether they like it or not. I learned how to accept the fact of not being required or not the chosen one. I've learned all that, so it doesn't really bother me. I just do what I feel is right and what my mind tells me to do, and not what someone tells me to do, what my inner psyche, my inner self says, do it that way. And I follow it with utmost confidence, although it looks absurd at the time. But, you know, when I'm working, sometimes people off camera, like say somebody incidental type of thing, but involved in a way, start laughing at what I'm doing. And I get very angry, actually. I get very angry. I really can be quite strong. I do anything to get the right photo, anything. Obviously, I would not do of course, there is a limit, but I would do anything, basically, yeah. Put a car right on the edge of a precipice. If there's someone going to be photographed in a car, or talking them into doing things at times. I think through my career, I could say that accidents do happen, and they can be really constructive. That, like, things fall away from what you've decided to do, just a fraction. When I was doing double exposures and things, I'd lose concentration on was that the first exposure, was that the second, you know what I mean? And like my Siouxsie of the Banshees, a very famous photograph, because I got it wrong. I did a double exposure on, a triple exposure I did instead of a double. Well, that one over there obviously is a world famous photograph that's over there. That's the album cover, which everybody in the world knows that near enough. That is the one picture that's famous in the world. I was working on Esquire magazine, and I worked on Rolling Stone, and I noticed that in America, people were using a mixture of flash and available light out in the beautiful sunshine. And I thought, I like the look that gives, But they were using it very blatantly, like a lot of photographers do, like using it, maybe soften it and put the light up, and then the daylight does part of the work and the one light does another part of the work. But I used multiple lights on people. I wanted to take it more away from photography to painting. And I found that gave it a real painterly feel, using a backlight, whatever, a front light, rim light, whatever. And that was when I came back from America, and I bought these lights are behind me now. These lights are from the early 80s. They're called Pro Photos. They're like 200 joules. I used 4 of those to do that picture when I came back from America. And of course, I would put some light shapeness on the lights. It was up in East Anglia, just south of Norfolk, south of in Cambridgeshire. There was a lot of rain around, and it had been raining, and the clouds broke and rain stopped. But there's more than that picture. There was obviously variations of it. I had a meeting with the band and the manager, and we came to the conclusion together what the band did adhered to what I was interested in at that time. It's doing the real workers and then the fictional stuff for the album covers, which seemed to marry really well, and I got some really interesting pictures from it. I remember once in my studio, it was the first studio I had. It was 980 square feet, I think. I built a pool in my studio, and then I went down to the ship model shop down the road in Greenwich, and came back with a model of a ship and put that in the water as well. And then I used to use the special effect of movement of white, whatever it was white, and I'd cut a piece of white card out like that, and then put a black wire to it, and then put it at the front of the ship and slightly underwater. It's another album cover. And go, whoo, 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 whoo. It was for Wang Chung, Points of a Curve. Those two, I really like those two images. Brian May really likes it a lot, but he's never bought it. It was being raffled off at a very big event for the homeless. And who was there was the King's son, William. Did anyone want to buy a picture of the back of someone's head? But it is a really good image, and people really alight to that image as well. It was to advertise a Sony Walkman. It was a good advertising job, actually. I had like about 4 or 5 portraits. Whatever I wanted to do, whatever. I could do whatever. I wasn't told what to do. And that worked out really well. And the other one was George Melly, where the rings are eyes. The rings are eyes like that. That was another good one, but that didn't get through. I get things censored. I get work censored sometimes. Colour photography gives everything away, doesn't it? Everything. Basically everything. Whilst black and white photography doesn't give that much information, it's just basically shape and tone, and it makes images look a bit more surreal than colour images. Although I know Surrealist painters, they're all in colour, most of the most famous Surrealist paintings. But also I think it's because the Black Country was black and white. I didn't see any colour in the Black Country when I was a boy. I didn't see any colour at all. It was all black and white, like an expressionist movie, really, living there. All the hot steel, all the rolling mills, all the sound. I love the music there, the music from all the machines, all the sound, all the forges, everything. The booms, the doo-doo-doos, whatever. And all the light coming, the wonderful light coming from the hot steel. And it marries itself so well, to black and white photography, that world. It seemed like a black and white world. It was a black and white world. I can't see colour when I look back at my childhood. Obviously it was there, but I can't see it in a colourful way. Black Country gave me made me what I am, actually, and gave me all those inspirations, those motivations with regards to all my life in photography, really.